Wavelength.
Just because we're doing our lectures online doesn't mean that we need to then retreat and make life, all about being alone.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide.
I think there's not enough knowledge around the severity of the long-term impacts that a concussion can give you, and it's not really educated enough.
You should be having.
The minimum job search requirements is definitely problematic, and it is up to a computer to decide whether you receive your payments each month.
This is Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength, Sparking the Convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, Cass, and tonight I'm joined by my very new co-host, Ella. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Before we jump in, we do need to acknowledge that we are recording Wavelengths on the land of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pay respects to elders past and present.
We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We acknowledge that they're in continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. We also extend that to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations.
I hope you've all had a great weekend. It's a gorgeous Monday here in Adelaide.
Yes, and we just had you on news, didn't we, Ella?
You sure did, but I just stayed around in the studio because I just want to be here all night. Couldn't get enough of it.
Well, we are so glad that you're here. Tonight we have a big show filled with some weird and wacky stories. I reckon we should just jump in.
Tonight on the show, we delve into the world of roller derby.
We sure do. And later on, we talk about the newest craze on the internet, underconsumption core.
But before all that, Liz is talking to Tom Kloeden, the Regional Coordinator for Grazing Pressures Management, about deer hunting in the Adelaide Hills.
Take it away, Liz.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
What are the primary reasons for the increase in feral deer numbers in the Mitcham Hills region?
Well, it's not just the Mitcham Hills region. It's across both of the Green Adelaide and Hills and Fleurier regions and potentially across the state as well, wherever deer are found. Their numbers increase naturally by about 35% per year, and particularly in the areas close to townships and cities like the Mitcham Hills, there's not a lot of control effort because it's difficult for landowners to do shooting or whatever, and there's also no natural predation of these animals.
What significant long-term ecological impacts may occur from this feral deer population?
It mostly comes down to grazing pressure and trampling damage as well. These deer will eat quite a lot, and that can change the structure of the vegetation community.
How have you noticed the community responding to the feral deer population or the eradication program?
In these areas where there are quite a lot of deer, the landowners in general, have experienced impacts from the deer, and they're quite, on board with the whole idea of getting rid of them because they've just had enough. They start damaging their gardens, or they hit one with their car, or whatever it is.
Do you believe that the eradicating of these deers is humane and effective?
There's no nice way for these animals to die. We also need to consider that we need to do this work now so we can actually have less deer in the future and actually less animals that need to be shot. So it's actually more humane overall to act early and deal with it straight up.
How do the bodies get disposed of in an ethical way?
In some situations, it is possible to harvest these animals, but a lot of the time, particularly on smaller properties or dense vegetation or inaccessible areas, it's not viable or even possible because the food hygiene requirements can't be met. A lot of the time, these animals will be left in situ wherever they're shot, and they will decompose rapidly into the soil.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks so much for that, Liz and Tom.
I'm going to jump into some music. Right after the break, I'll talk to Alexa Spyridonidis, founder, creative director and head stylist at Social Sphere, about underconsumption core. You're here on Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. And the internet has gone crazy with a trend called underconsumption core. Ella, what does this mean?
Well, let me get into it.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Could you tell me a little bit about the underconsumption core trend circulating across social media right now?
Yes, from what I can see, it's basically a movement to try and move away from the fast fashion sort of scene, really prioritising quality over quantity and kind of promoting that we need to extend the life of our items. So just really reducing the number of items we own, making sure that we're prioritising those pieces that have a nicer quality rather than just buying things for the sake of trends and throwing them out after the trend is over.
With the trend popping up as a response to haul videos, influencer recs and restock videos, do you think this has the potential to see influencers move away from this type of content?
I think it's kind of hard just because videos like unboxings and sort of restock videos are really on trend right now, and I think that they have been for a while. So I don't think that those types of videos are going to phase out completely, but I think if people become more aware of this sort of underconsumption movement, I think that they're going to change the type of videos that they push out. So instead of kind of showing hauls of the new items they bought from, fast fashion brands and things, I think that they'll start pushing out videos that are, pieces that they found from thrift stores or local people that make the sort of things that are the one-off or like upcycled things.
Some critics of the trend think this is just glamorizing normal consumption, if anything. What would you say to this point?
I mean, I don't really disagree. I think in a perfect world, it should be the norm. But I think that the trend is kind of just more to be seen as a positive step towards sustainability and not so much, this is how it should be and this should be normal. But I think it's just more encouraging a more thoughtful approach to consumption. So I think we need to kind of consider that in a world where overconsumption has really become the norm. I think just returning back to, mindful purchases is really what the movement is trying to promote rather than, the whole glamorization of it should be normal.
People are saying the main reasons for the trend is obviously its environmental impacts, but would you say there's an economic factor contributing to the rise in its popularity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything is so expensive right now. Like inflation is crazy. I think that people they don't have the funds to be able to be wasting money on these trends that kind of come to light. And I think especially for parents with kids that, want to jump on these trends all the time, I don't think parents actually want to give in to the trends because they know that in probably 3 weeks' time, they're not going to want to borrow it and they're going to want to throw it out. So I think that there's definitely an economic factor, and I think...
And is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think just in general, I think people need to kind of be a bit more mindful with their purchases. I think this sort of movement is really important just because it reminds people to do their research on the brand that they're buying from. So I think, looking into the sustainability behind a brand, especially in fashion, I think girls especially, there's so many trends running through social media at the moment. In fashion, it's really hard to not give into it. I'm very guilty of it myself. I've, gotten a lot of things just because they're trendy, but when I look back on it, I really don't think it's that necessary. I think investing in those quality pieces, if it costs you a little bit more upfront, I think it's so fine because you're going to have it in 5 years' time. I think that I would rather put the money upfront knowing that I'm going to have something for a couple of years rather than wasting money on something that's trendy or something that's very hot right now. So yeah, I think just do your research behind the brand, make sure that you're making ethical purchases, and, finding local designers.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide, you should be having Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wow, thanks that Ella and Alexia. I feel like these kind of trends come up every couple of years and it's a bit of breath of fresh air, I think, of kind of talking about the normal human experience. I think when you spend a lot of time on social media, it can kind of become very normalized that people are getting products every single day. They're spending money every single day. The normal person can't afford that, let alone is that good for the environment, especially when there's a lot of hidden sponsored content. I think people forget that like a lot of these influencers are being paid to promote this sort of content. So I really like this idea that like people are using products until the end of their longevity and, wearing products until they have holes in it. I think I think there's something special about this.
No, absolutely. But also like, why aren't we already doing this in the first place?
Right.
So, yeah. And I really hope this trend is here to stay. Our text line is open Adelaide on 0428 927 927. Let us know what you think about the episode so far.
Wavelength.
Just before the break, we spoke to Alexia about Underconsumption Core. What's up next, Cass?
Right now, I wanted to find out a little bit more about the full contact sport of roller derby.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Hello, my name is Isabel. I skate with the Adelaide Roller Derby League. People know me as Bellie, or my roller derby name, which is Ankle Grinder. The roller derby is a full contact sport on roller skate. We skate around a track that's flat on the ground and you score points in the game. So there's no ball. You score points by passing your opponent's hips. So to try and stop our opponents from passing our hips, we want to hit them off the track or hit them down. So a rough full contact sport on roller skate.
How has the sport evolved over the years?
I guess it started, some listeners might be aware of roller derby back in the kind of 60s and 70s, where it was quite theatrical and then kind of lost popularity because it was quite staged. So it was kind of quite staged like wrestling. And then it came back in the modern revival, I think, around 2005 in Texas. And I guess when it started back in its modern revival, it still had some of that theatrical element, although it was always, a serious kind of competitive sport. And I think from then till now, I think that it kind of has kind of gotten more serious and more competitive again.
What makes roller derby so special in South Australia?
I think that what makes roller derby so special anywhere is the community that is involved. So we are a sport, but we're also a community. And one of the things that really grows that sense of community is that we are 100% skater run. So when you play roller derby, you're also involved in, running the league, which means that you've got a lot of buy-in and you're working together a lot with other people to kind of keep the sport going. I think what makes roller derby so special in South Australia is that we have a great league in Adelaide. We were one of the first leagues in Australia, I think a great league to be part of. This year, our league actually qualified for global championships as well. So we're going to global champs in Portland in November. So that's a pretty special thing for South Australian roller derby.
What advice would you give someone interested in the sport?
To strap on a pair of roller skates and give it a go. It can be quite daunting, but putting some roller skates on and getting comfortable skating around will then kind of get you ready for the next step. We hold tryouts for our league just after August. So generally they'll start in September, October, where we teach people how to roller skate first, and then we teach people the sport of roller derby afterwards.
And how do people get involved?
So you can check us out on social media. So we've got Adelaide Roller Derby on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a website, adelaiderollerderby.com, and links to our new skater intake program will be added very soon. So kind of keep an eye on socials, and then we'll host an information night at the Wheatsheaf Hotel, and then we'll start our come and try event. If you are into sport and you want to see Adelaide compete on the global stage, there'll be information about how to do that, how to support us.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks so much for that, Cass and Isabel. You're here on Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
You're on Wavelength here on your Monday night with Cass and Ella, and right now it's my favourite time of the episode. It's Heaps Good News.
Can't get enough of this. What's going on, Alicia?
I know there's gonna be
Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
Adelaide has had its fair share of heaps good news these last 2 weeks. With the Olympics ending, the Australian Olympic team have produced an incredible result for the nation. In the end, Australia finished 4th on the Paris 2024 medal table. Days 7 and 12 proved to be the most lucrative for the Australian Olympic team. In other news, Oz Harvest opened Adelaide's first free supermarket. The supermarket offers fresh produce, pantry staple items and cooked meals that have been rescued from local businesses for those who are struggling with the rising cost of grocery bills. Not only does this offer food relief for those in South Australia, but prevents food from being wasted that is otherwise destined for landfill. The Oz Harvest grocery store is in Hindmarsh. The South Australian Living Artists Festival showcases and celebrates artists from all over SA, giving artists the opportunity to share their work. The festival spans the entire state, which means regional residents are able to see art locally and have access to more expositions. The festival has already kicked off, running from the 1st to the 31st of August. South Australia's planning guidelines have been changed and have recently been updated, which means churches can be used for temporary overnight crisis accommodation. 2 churches in the northern suburbs have decided to open their doors to those homeless as temporary sleeping quarters while they run a trial. The trial will begin on the 19th of August. The 2 churches, the Elizabeth Church of Christ and the Playford Baptist Church, will rotate hosting crisis accommodation on Monday and Tuesday nights for a preliminary duration of 3 weeks. The program will hopefully set them up for continuous service next winter. The brush-tailed possum, which is recently thought to be extinct in the Red Centre, has had 40 brush-tailed possums from Kangaroo Island relocated to start a new population in Central Australia. These possums will also bring benefits to the local ecosystems, such as being seed dispersers.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide, you should be having Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
And that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you so much for listening.
Make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and tonight's episode will be up soon.
That is officially it from us tonight.
Wavelength.